So insulin is the bad guy in the story. There's just no way to make it the good guy. Now,
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back to The Empowering Neurologist. I'm Dr. David Perlmutter. We have a very exciting show for you today. Our guest is Dr. Robert Lustig. He's the author of a book called Fat Chance. We interviewed him in the past about that book. His new book is called Metabolical. It is an amazing, amazing book. It really is a deep dive into asking the question, what's wrong with our healthcare system? And I'll start off by simply saying that we spend 97.5% of our healthcare dollars dealing with the treatment of diseases, much of which can be prevented. Only about 2.5% of healthcare expenditure in the United States goes to actual disease prevention. And Dr. Lustig calls it out. He calls out what are the fundamentals leading to chronic degenerative conditions and why these are the things that really need to be addressed. I'm really very excited about our interview today. Let me tell you a little bit more about Dr. Lustig. Dr. Lustig is Emeritus Professor of Pediatrics in the Division of Endocrinology and member of the Institute for Health Policy Studies at the University of California, San Francisco. He has authored 130 peer-reviewed articles, 80 academic chapters and reviews, and dozens of op-eds for the public. His 2009 YouTube lecture, Sugar, the Bitter Truth, has accrued 12 million views. He's the former chairman of the Obesity Task Force of the Pediatric Endocrine Society, a member of the Obesity Task Force of the Endocrine Society, and a member of the Pediatric Obesity Devices Committee of the U.S. FDA, Food and Drug Administration. He's also the chief science officer of the nonprofit group Eat Real, which is dedicated to reversing childhood obesity and type 2 diabetes by bringing real food into schools. Dr. Lustig has never taken money from the food industry, so he has no issues with respect to conflicts of interest that he needs to declare. Very excited about our interview, and here we go. I don't say this lightly, and I don't say it often. This is a groundbreaking book. I mean,
well, thank you.
You called it out in any way you could imagine. You called it out. What's going on, and it's sobering. It's empowering for many of us, and it's very enlightening. I think what you've shown us. I mean, we're going to jump right in. I did in the intro talked about what the book is about, but to kids today and people today that are challenging their insulin levels day in and day out, based upon the let's make the connection. We may as well jump right into it with both feet. Based upon the influences of big food industry, indicating really having a huge role to play in influencing what our dietary choices are.
Right.
I'm super comfortable in the time we have together that we jump right into that, because I think what we're going to develop here, what your book talks about, is this relationship between the influences on our food choices, our illnesses that we then develop, and how our medical system responds to that in the form of giving us drugs to treat the very problems that were induced by the choices that we thought we made that were actually not, that were made for us.
Exactly.
So the segue is probably going to be insulin and also leptin and loss of leptin sensitivity.
Indeed. So insulin is the bad guy in the story. There's just no way to make it the good guy. Now, it is true you need insulin. If you don't have insulin, you have type 1 diabetes, and you will die early, from ketoacidosis or from, various other, retinopathy, nephropathy, neuropathy, all bad things. But you don't need a lot of insulin. You need just enough. And the problem is, if you have too much, you activate a whole set of other pathways in the cell, all of which lead to vascular smooth muscle proliferation, reduced autophagy, and increased risk for cancer.
Let me stop you right there, because you brought up something very important. That is, higher levels of insulin that we bring onto our cells by eating higher diet that's higher in refined carbohydrates stimulates the growth of these muscle cells within the blood vessels. We really need, let's unpack that for just a moment, because it's so important as it relates to blood pressure, the kidney, et cetera.
That's right. So Insulin is a growth factor. It's the ultimate growth factor. It is the growth factor in the fetus. It is the growth factor in, the adult. It is a growth factor. There is the insulin receptor is coupled to a pathway in the cell that basically makes cells grow and divide. It's called MAP kinase, mitogen associated protein kinase. And that pathway is very important when you are growing, like for instance a fetus. But once you've stopped growing, you don't really want a whole lot of that. And the problem is that the more insulin, the more growth. And so we should be trying to keep our insulin secretion and our down and our insulin sensitivity up in order to get our cells to burn. And one of the things I talk about in the book is the difference between growing and burning. Those are the two stereotypical paradigms of cellular physiology. A cell can grow or a cell can burn, but they can't do both at the same time. Okay, they cannot walk and chew gum at the same time. So if they're growing, then you want insulin to be high, and you want cells to not have much oxygen, because oxygen actually stimulates the mitochondria to burn. And you want the glucose not to be burned. You want the glucose to be turned into structural elements for the cell. You want it to be turned into lipids for membranes. You want it to be turned into amino acids for proteins. You want it to be turned into nucleic acids and ribose, for DNA in order to be able to divide. So that switch in the cell that switches you from burning to growing or back again is insulin dependent. And so when the insulin's high, you are going to grow, you're not going to burn. And that is good when you're a fetus. It's bad when you're an adult. We've basically engineered our food to basically take advantage of this pathway to growth, which we don't want to be doing.
So for our viewers, if you want to learn more about this, there's an interview we did recently with James Clement, who is the author of the book, The Switch, and it talks about these things like AMP kinase and the mTOR pathway. So if you want to learn more, that would be a place to go. In your very last sentence, Dr. Lustig, you just said that the foods that we are eating are really very relevant as it relates to our ability to get rid of things versus continuing to build and having cells divide like we might not want in the world where we're at risk for cancer, for example. There's certainly a place for that. But I think you've really hit upon something that I think maybe our viewers are not so aware of. You'll learn that insulin's involved with packing sugar away after a high glucose or carbohydrate meal. End of story. But you're letting us know that it's a powerful growth factor. It's a powerful stimulator or trophic hormone in the body and in the brain, not that the brain's not part of the body, that insulin plays a really critical role in the brain as well, acting again as a trophic hormone. So when we become less able to respond to insulin, we become insulin resistant because the level gets higher and higher because we continue to challenge it. Then we see manifestations across the board throughout the body. You talked about this notion of, the tenet of your book is protect the liver and feed the gut. That if we could adhere to those principles, we'd go a long way towards staying healthy. So why don't we start first with protect the liver?
Sure. So protect the liver means a bunch of things. Your liver is your detoxification organ. It's supposed to, get rid of toxins of various sorts. It metabolizes virtually all drugs, through various cytochromes. But ultimately, the liver has a limit. It has a capacity, and if you exceed that capacity, the liver gets sick. Turns out the liver has a capacity to metabolize alcohol. We know that. I mean, all you have to do is show up at your local bar, and you can see the guy who walks out, and you can see the guy who gets dragged out. Okay, and what was the difference? The number of drinks. And and the bartender knows it too, and now they go to jail if they let the guy have 5 drinks and then get in his car. There's a limit to how well your liver can metabolize alcohol. If you exceed that, bad things happen. Well, it turns out sugar, the molecule fructose, the sweet molecule in sugar, and alcohol are metabolized by the liver virtually identically. And if you look at the biochemistry of the two molecules, it makes sense that that would be the case. Because after all, where do you get alcohol from? Fermentation of sugar. It's called wine. We do it in Napa and Sonoma every day. The big difference between sugar and alcohol is that for alcohol, the yeast does the first step of metabolism called glycolysis. For sugar, we do our own first step. But after that, the liver can't tell the difference as to where it came from. So then it shouldn't be surprising to us that kids today get the diseases of alcohol without alcohol. Type 2 diabetes, fatty liver disease, these were diseases of alcohol until 1980. When you saw these, you said, oh, this is an alcoholic. But now kids get them. And in fact, 25% of the entire pediatric population of the United States have fatty liver. Now, they don't drink alcohol. Where'd the fat come from? Turns out that fat in that liver is now causing their liver to not work so well. And their pancreas, which makes the insulin, has to make extra to make the liver do its job. That's raising insulin levels all over the body. And that's meaning there's more insulin pressing on every organ, especially fat cells. And that's driving the weight gain. And it's also driving the chronic disease. And it's also, unfortunately, driving cognitive dysfunction and will ultimately it's driving dementia as well. So this phenomenon of hyperinsulinemia due to dysfunctional liver has been ignored by the medical establishment for the last 40 years, since we first realized that we had this thing called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. You have to protect the liver. The liver can't handle it. In the same way it can't handle excess alcohol, it can't handle excess sugar.
So this assault upon the liver by sugar is very, very widespread.
It is 45% of American adults and 25% of American children today, having nothing to do with obesity. So everyone says, well, only in fat people. Wrong. Thin people too. Yeah, less in thin people than fat people, but in everybody. And actually, it turns out there are more thin sick people in America than there are fat sick people. And 88% of Americans have insulin resistance, have metabolic dysfunction, because their liver is overwhelmed. So this is the main problem. This is the driver of chronic metabolic disease, and it's because of our food.
And the player here is the difference between how we metabolize glucose versus fructose. And table sugar is immediately broken down, 50% glucose, 50% fructose, into free available fructose. And that makes the story of high fructose corn syrup even more compelling, doesn't it?
Fructose does a lot of things that are not so good. It does. So people think that a sugar is a sugar. Now, why do they think that? Because the food industry says so. Are there any data anywhere in the literature that says a sugar is a sugar? No, nowhere. Okay. They only say that because the food industry says so. When you actually look at the data, it's very clear that this is not the case. Glucose is the energy of life. Every cell on the planet burns glucose for energy. Glucose is so friggin' goddamn important that if you don't consume it, your body makes it. Right? The Inuit, they don't have any carbohydrate. They don't have any fields to grow any carbohydrate. They don't have any wheat. They don't have any rice. They don't have any corn. They don't have any pasta. They don't have nothing. They got whale blubber. All right, but they still have a glucose level, a serum glucose level. And the reason is because it's so important that your liver will take amino acids or fatty acids, the glycerol and fatty acids, and will turn it into glucose. It's a process called gluconeogenesis. We learned it in medical school. Unfortunately, the food industry did not, because they say you need sugar to live. No, you don't. You do not need sugar to live. No one needs sugar to live. No cell on the planet needs sugar to live. But they say it because that's how they sell their products. So we have to get rid of the subterfuge and we have to get rid of the propaganda. And the only way to do it is with science.
Well, that's the central theme of your book is calling out the subterfuge. I mean, you pulled no punches in that regard.
This is a no holds barred, I like to say, this is a kiss and tell, but really because it's about diabetes, it's really more a piss and tell. Fructose does a lot of things that are not so good. Ron Kahn, the head of the CEO of Joslin Diabetes Center at Harvard, published a paper. The first author was Softic, Softic, in 2019, where he showed that glucose stimulates mitochondrial function through activation of both AMP kinase and HADH, which is hydroxyacyl-CoA dehydrogenase, which is the third step on fatty acid oxidation. So basically, burn, burn, burn. Glucose makes cells burn, 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 which is good. Fructose, not only does it inhibit AMP kinase, but it also inhibits another enzyme called ACAD-L, acyl-CoA dehydrogenase long chain. And so what happens is the fats build up. And so now you got fatty liver. So every single thing about a sugar is a sugar or a calorie is a calorie is absolute total nonsense, complete garbage. But of course, the food industry, this is their juggernaut. This is their gravy train. They're not giving it up, even today.
At the risk of getting too far into the weeds, though I love this stuff, and I think many of our viewers kind of fancy that they enjoy it as well. Thank you again, and terrific to see you.
You too. You too. Always my pleasure. Thank you.
All I can say is, wow. What an interview that was. Dr. Lustig has done some incredible work. And, it's very disruptive, but it's certainly what we've needed to hear for a very long time. Again, the book is called Metabolical. Very, very glad that he's spent so much time doing so much research and really gifting us this incredible deep dive into what's really going on as it relates to healthcare here in America. Thank you for joining me on the program today. I'm Dr. David Perlmutter, and we'll be back soon. Bye for now.